NFL expert Daniel Jeremiah has correctly predicted the Chargers' first-round pick 2 years in a row, and this year he has them taking Kenyon Sadiq.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers for 10 seasons now, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. David, what do we got today?
Surely Daniel Jeremiah selected an offensive lineman, right? He went with a freakazoid athlete tight end, Kenyon Sadiq.
Which is surprising. And obviously you don't ever want to draft for just need. And always you're going to say, and most of the time you think you can go best player available. But for the Chargers and what their specific needs are, and if you watch the show we had earlier today talking about their biggest needs, tight end wasn't one of them, right? So it's pretty surprising to see Daniel Jeremiah pick the Chargers to take a star Oregon tight end, Kenyon Sadiq, who has, basically been unanimously voted as the best tight end in this upcoming draft class. But obviously we know the Chargers have a tight end that played very well for them last season. But the reason that this one is more significant than others is because Daniel Jeremiah has basically been Nostradamus as far as his mock draft 2.0s, because that's what this one is. It's his mock draft 2.0. And the last couple of years, David, whoever he had them taking in his mock draft 2.0 actually came true, which is important for someone as plugged in as Daniel Jeremiah is.
Yeah, obviously with Daniel Jeremiah, he watches the Chargers very, very closely as he is on color commentary with Matt Money Smith, the voice of the Chargers. So he, if you ask anybody, any expert out there that covers the NFL, he probably pays a little bit more attention to the Chargers than any other team. I think we can all say that quite safely. So this is a pick that was really surprising given that information, that he went with a playmaker, that he went with an electric type of playmaker here for the Chargers. That was definitely something that was very surprising, very interesting for me, because this guy knows what he's talking about. Daniel Jeremiah, he's one of the great NFL analysts, draft analysts that are around.
He is, and, there's a reason why he has been right about the Chargers, because, if you're the Raiders, Fernando Mendoza is going to be a very obvious pick, and I'm sure there's a lot of NFL writers that be like, I got this one, right? I know this one. Outside of that, though, it's all a crapshoot, man.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously,
Big
certain
time.
years you have, quarterbacks who are thought of as can't-miss prospects, and those guys will go first, and maybe you can kind of predict those a little bit. But for 22nd pick, right, or even where the Chargers have picked the last couple of years, 5th in the year they took Joe Alt, and then last year when they ended up picking in the 20s, and they took Omarion Hampton. But that's the crazy thing. In the 2025 Jeremiah mock draft 2.0, he had the Chargers taking Omarion Hampton. In 2024, in his mock draft 2.0, he had them taking Joe Alt. So when his mock draft 2.0 comes out, you listen, right? Because even though that wasn't his final mock, it still is weighted more than other national media people, to your point. Because a lot of, there's going to be a ton of NFL draft experts who will cover the entire NFL and the entirety of the draft process that are going to have their specific team who they're watching every week, week in and week out, and being the radio voice of it, right? So it's just different. And even in those final mocks, David, last year he had them taking Travion Henderson, right? Out of nowhere. His last one, we're like, whoa, right? But he was still right on the position.
Yeah.
The year before that, he didn't have them taking Joe Alt in his final mock draft, but he had him taking J.C. Latham, right?
Yeah.
So he still had that position. So, it does feel like him saying this, not that it's the end-all be-all, but means maybe at least he knows the Chargers aren't totally maybe sold on not taking, a tight end or potentially straying away from taking just an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. Like, the last mock draft tackle we talked about was everyone. Everyone had them taking an offensive or defensive tackle or offensive guard, center, or a defensive tackle. And the interesting thing here and why it's so surprising is they already have Aronde Gadsden II, David, which makes it be like, hey, well, that's not really the biggest need for this team at all.
It's not even close to the biggest need for this
It's not
team.
on the top 3.
It's not in the top 3. It's not even to me, it's probably not even the top 7, 8, or might not even be in the top 10 to me. I mean, with what Aronde Gadsden II was able to show last year, I think to me, he's the tight end of the future for the Chargers. He is that pass catching threat, that guy that is really going to be dangerous. And I think only can see his role expanding and being more dangerous in the red zone, getting more opportunities now that they know what this guy can do. And also, you're pairing him with a guy who just got the most out of Darren Waller and Mike McDaniel, who is going to see a guy like Aronde Gadsden II and just let his imagination run wild with all of the possibilities that he can involve him in the offense and feature him. And I think he's going to get Aronde Gadsden paid a lot of money with how he is going to put him in positions to use his already very unique skill set in this offense. I can't wait to watch it. I'm very, very excited for it, which is why this was a very puzzling move for me, because they have to go offensive line or defensive line. Like, it just seems like trenches makes way too much sense. So to get any kind of weapon, and I mean, whether it's wide receiver, tight end, running back in the first round with their first overall pick, I just don't understand the logic there.
No, obviously they have way bigger needs in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and you don't want them to have to draft for a need, but it would seem, to be going way out there to go so far away from where their needs are. And I'll say this, after watching, Mike McDaniel's offense and specifically what he's asking of his tight ends, there's no doubt in my mind that tight end is a need. A complimentary tight end for Aronde Gadsden specifically is a need for this team. Now, is it a first-round pick need? No. Right? But there are going to be guys they need to complement him, because even Darren Waller, right, in the games he played, it wasn't like he was getting 50, 60 targets last year, right? He had a very specific role, and Aronde Gadsden's going to have a role, but he's also going to want somebody, maybe someone that brings the skill set like someone Kenyon Sadiq was. Whether you think he's the right pick or not at 22, there's one thing that's pretty undeniable, and that is I would still love to see what Mike McDaniel could do with him. So we're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app, and it's a huge time saver. Gives you a real peace of mind knowing that an expert is handling it, and when you're as, unknowledgeable as me with taxes, you want to have that peace of mind, and I wouldn't do it doing it myself. So for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off of your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Ever wanted an experience in NBA Finals live and in person and cross that off your bucket list? Well, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. And if you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep playoff run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, especially because I feel like you start to actually get a gauge of who the best teams are. But whether it's a championship, whether it's grabbing a conference title, it adds the extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can your pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Right now, if you're looking at the futures, Oklahoma City, the prohibitive favorite at plus 130. What about Wemby at plus 1100 with the Spurs? What about the Celtics, who have gone really hot at plus 1100? There's so many, and if you visit FanDuel.com to get started and use your profit boost on an NBA future, you get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. David, we talked about all of the responsible parts of Kenyon Sadiq and the Chargers not taking him because they obviously have bigger needs elsewhere. And as of right now, before free agency, it's pretty incomprehensible to think about them taking anything outside of the trenches, right? And we talked about that on our show earlier today. Their top three biggest draft needs, and obviously tight end wasn't one of them. That being said, that's not to take away from the prospect that is Kenyon Sadiq, because obviously, after watching some of them, as both of us did, it's very easy to see why someone would think, hey, this is a guy that should be taken in the first round because of the skill set that he brings to the table.
Oh yeah, I mean the guy's an electric playmaker. Like there's no question about that. I mean you put on the tape and you see the ball go his way in a multitude of different ways, and you understand why. 6'3", 245 pounds. Really had his big breakout year this past year, 2025, where he had over 50 catches and 560 yards with 8 receiving touchdowns, and he was a big focal point of that Oregon Ducks offense for sure.
Yeah.
He was able to work in tight. He works in the slot. He was able to split out wide like a wide receiver. He kind of has wide receiver tendencies with his releases and his route running. He has really strong physical hands. Was able to make catches through contact. He caught a touchdown up the seam against USC, where he really took some punishment. He took a couple of hits and he was able to still secure that ball. Saw him literally leap like hurdle over a defender completely.
Some hurdles in his resume,
the athleticism is clearly there. And I think for me, what surprised me a little bit was I feel like he's a capable blocker, more capable than I was expecting. I thought he was just going to be a weapon, but they used him as a lead blocker, used his athleticism to get out there and try to pick guys off at the first and second level. And he continues to work. Like, if he's there at the first level, he tries to find more work in that aspect of it. So a guy who is a pretty well-rounded player from the games that I've seen. Obviously, I'm going to dig more into him as we get a little bit closer to the draft and we get into that. But from what I saw, they got the ball in his hands quickly. They got the ball in his hands in the intermediate and in the deep part of the field, and he was able to make plays in all 3 areas.
Yeah, and only 20 years old right now, and will be 20 when he gets drafted. So plenty of room to
grow. He doesn't look it either.
No, yeah, he looks fully developed. And, they had a Terrence Ferguson in the way last year who had his own huge season for the Ducks before I think the Rams traded a bunch up to go get him, right, last year. So he had his chance this year. It's still only 1 year production, and you mark that down however much you kind of value that as far as the marks against him for sure. Led the NCAA in receiving touchdowns at the tight end position last year with 8 of them. Did have a bit of a drop problem, 6 drops last season, so definitely something that can be cleaned up there, but also has kind of the spectacular catches on his resume too, and that's something that he brings to the table, right? Like you're getting someone who is very effective in the red zone, very effective at stretching the field kind of outside that red zone and finding that sweet spot from about 30 yards out, right, 25 to 40 yards out, where they love those seam passes to him and have a few touchdowns there. And, I think at the same time, a better, more developed blocker than Aronde Gadsden was coming out, right? And I think has the physicality, has the violence, right? Has the want to, which is huge. Does have a lot to clean up as far as consistency and, dead whiff at times on some of those blocks. So it's not a perfect prospect. But like when you're seeing the quick game, David, and I think it's important to see how Oregon used him, right? Because it's very easy to look at Mike McDaniel and be like, I'd love to see Mike McDaniel using this guy on screen passes, right? And using him as a lead blocker that you might not, like, you can't use Will Dissly. He's going to be great in blowing a guy potentially off the line of scrimmage, but you can't use him necessarily to pick off a guy here or there. Like having someone as athletic that can also block like a Kenyon Sadiq would open up things for the Chargers in the passing game and the running game.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think you look at him as a more well-rounded prospect, and I did see those whiffs on tape as well.
Yeah.
Where and most of the time it was really like closer to the line of scrimmage type, where he was going up against like quick defensive ends, where he was able to kind of just shrug him off.
Yeah,
I think I saw it in those instances.
Good at hitting moving targets for the most part.
But yes, he was very good at that, and this guy has real size on him. Like this guy's real like he's a big dude, and
he's well built.
Yes, he is very, very well built, and he uses that frame very, very well when he is blocking. But yeah, they did a great job of using him in the quick passing game as well, like as a like quick outlet, because he did have some yards after catch ability.
Yeah.
I mean, he jump over you, run around you, run through you. He does have some really rare skills, and with Mike McDaniel who does a great job of scheming up what the tight ends do, and also just the quick passing game is such a big staple of his offense. You could see a multitude of different ways and screens that they could utilize to get him the ball, and how he would be a really big catalyst type of player for any offense.
Yeah, and Aronde Gadsden is like a split out tight end, right? You put him in the slot. You're not necessarily having to try to use him on the end of the line of scrimmage. Isn't the best way he's going to be used, and probably never will be, right?
No.
Neither was Darren Waller, who was super effective. This is someone who can do a little bit of that, right? And will pop a defensive end in the mouth if he has to, and also can be that kind of move tight end that you can move all around the formation. That could be, what some of these Shanahan teams have, like somewhere between, a Kyle Juszczyk and like an actual tight end, right? So there's a lot of different ways we've seen Mike McDaniel get creative in using his players. So even though I don't think this is going to happen, it's a lot of fun to think about how he would use them, and the Chargers potentially giving him a weapon like that. But that's going to wrap things up for the bonus show today. Make sure you're back here for the big show tomorrow in our buy or sell show, and hit us up for that at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page, so you guys can get your buy or sell on the show. We're calling to 323-524-7924 if you want to leave us a 30-second voicemail. But that's going to wrap it up for today. Make sure you're subscribing and following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel so you never miss these extra shows that are coming out. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.